This is CNN.
This is CNN Breaking News.
And this is the scene in the U.S. Capitol, where top U.S. officials say today is the most intense day of U.S. strikes on Iran yet, and claim that the U.S. is prevailing. It is 9 a.m. in Washington, Tuesday, March the 10th. It is 5 p.m. here in Abu Dhabi in the UAE. From our Middle East programming headquarters, I'm Becky Anderson. You're watching Connect World. Well, the U.S. Defense Secretary says day 11 of the U.S.-Israeli war in Iran will be the most intense day so far. Peter Hegseth, speaking at a Pentagon briefing last hour, trying to downplay concerns over a potentially long, drawn-out war. Have a listen.
This is not endless nation building under those types of quagmires we saw under Bush or Obama. It's not even close. Instead, we're winning decisively with brutal efficiency, total air dominance, and an unbreakable will to accomplish the president's objectives on our timeline.
Well, the U.S. Joint Chiefs Chairman also speaking at that press conference, laying out the main U.S. objectives.
The joint force remains focused on three military objectives: continue to destroy Iranian ballistic missiles and drone capability in order to prevent attacks on the U.S. and others throughout the region. And this means attacking launch sites, command and control nodes, stockpiles before they can threaten our personnel, our facilities, and our partners. Second, we continue to strike the Iranian Navy and their capabilities in order to do things like sustain movement through the Straits of Hormuz. And third, we continue to start working on and going deeper into Iran's military and industrial base in order to prevent the regime from being able to attack Americans, our interests, and our partners for years to come and project power outside their borders.
Well, this coming after another night and day of heavy bombardment over Tehran. Rescuers trying to save people from the rubble of a destroyed building. Iran's UN ambassador says more than 1,300 civilians have been killed since this war began. The Pentagon releasing this video of U.S. attacks on Iranian missile launchers. Iran firing back and still targeting Gulf neighbors. Bahrain's Interior Ministry says one person was killed when an Iranian drone struck a residential building in Manama. Well, the war sparking intense concern over the world's oil suppliers. Iran threatens to keep blocking commercial oil shipping in the Strait of Hormuz today. A troubling new warning from the world's largest oil exporter if disruptions continue. We're going to do a deep dive into that part of the story in just a few minutes. Let's have a look at how the futures markets are doing ahead of the stock market in New York, which opens about 30 minutes from now. And this is the story on the futures markets, pointing lower. Oil prices as well as the stock market experiencing quite some wild swings on Monday after US President Donald Trump gave conflicting comments on just how long this war will last. More on that later. A CNN team in Tehran reporting heavy aerial bombardment overnight into Tuesday. They tell us the impacts were more severe than in previous days. And we should mention CNN operates in Iran with the permission of the Iranian government as required under local regulations there, but maintains full editorial control over what it reports. My colleague Fred Pleitgen is there and he describes what he heard and saw.
It was a very kinetic night here in the Iranian capital, Tehran. We ourselves witnessed several waves of what appeared to be very heavy airstrikes. And the building that we're in right now and that we're staying in was shaken on several occasions from the sheer force of the impact. Now, from our vantage point, it appeared as though especially targets in the east of Tehran were being attacked, also possibly around Mehrabad Airport, which is in the west of Tehran and is actually an area that has been attacked in the past as well. All this as the airstrikes conducted mostly by the U.S. and Israel continue not just here in Tehran, but of course throughout this entire country. Meanwhile, the political standoff also continues as well. President Trump, of course, saying that he vows to keep the Strait of Hormuz open for oil shipments into the world's markets, whereas the Iranians are warning that they are the ones who control the Strait of Hormuz. A source close to the Iranian government telling me that the Iranians are the ones who control the taps of the world's oil supply. They say that Iran is even thinking of imposing duties on ships carrying oil that are affiliated with countries friendly to the United States. At the same time, the Iranians are saying also at this point in time, they see no sense in negotiations with the United States and are preparing for what could be a long war. Fred Pleitgen, CNN, Tehran.
Well, I want to bring in a couple of colleagues of mine now. CNN's Nick Paton-Walsh is in Tel Aviv. Stephen Collinson is in Washington. And to both of you, thank you. Nick, let me start with you in the region. We've just heard from the Defense Secretary Peter Hegseth last hour, saying that Iran's leadership, and I quote him here, are desperate and scrambling. You've been covering this conflict in Iran's, strikes closely. What do you make of that assessment?
I mean, obviously, after the intense bombardment of the last 10 days, the death of their supreme leader, the delay it has taken to appoint his son as successor, the relative public silence that we've heard from Mujtaba Khamenei, there's been a lot of damage to Iran's theocracy, the regime there. Has that resulted in them being dysfunctional? You might say some of the drone strikes we've seen at the same time as the President of Iran has been reaching out to suggest they apologize to those same countries they were targeting in the same breath. That might be some element of dysfunctionality. But ultimately what we heard from Secretary of War Pete Hegseth was, again, a lot of bravado, a lot of clarity in terms of the small goals of the mission. And remember, at the beginning, we heard that missiles were the targets, the Navy were targets, and the nuclear weapons capability of Iran, diminished as it already was, were the key three goals here. He talked about how President Trump would ultimately define what victory looks like, but there was one important slight distinction we heard from the Joint Chief of Staff, General Dan Kane. He talked about the third point being degrading Iran's military and industrial complex there, their ability to make missiles and drones. That may perhaps be more tethered to the reality of what the Pentagon is hitting day by day, and may reflect a widening scope here, potentially, and what we've been seeing over the past days. And indeed, the day ahead, which Hegseth said would be the worst yet for Iranians. A reminder, over 1,200 Iranians killed by these US and Israeli strikes so far. Becky?
I'm interested in what's new and different out of this. Stephen, what do we hear from Hegseth a short time ago when compared with what President Trump said last night about how long this war might go on?
On Iran, you called it an excursion. You said it would be over soon. Are you thinking this week it will be over?
No,
Are you talking
but soon.
about days?
I think soon.
Okay, and with respect
Very
to...
soon.
Stephen.
This will go on as long as the military objectives need to be pursued. So I think what you have is a real contrast between the methodical, planned military operation here, which is clearly working on plans that have been refined for many years in the United States and Israel, and the chaotic, confusing, contradictory political messaging. Clearly, the president and the White House are feeling the heat from those high oil prices, plunging stock markets, the political impact back in the United States, and a feeling in the markets that this could go on for a very long time. And of course, that has not just immediate impacts, the halt to production of oil and liquid natural gas and the export, that can have long-term impacts on the economy in a midterm election year in the United States. So, I think one of President Trump's big problems often is that he speaks too much. He contradicts himself. He thinks out loud. He oddly commentates on his own actions. So that was a relatively disciplined performance from Hegseth and Kane that you saw there, at least by Hegseth's standards. And it contrasts with the, I think, skittishness about how this might last from the president. Clearly, they want to send a message that this is not forever. The military wants more time to pursue its targets that Nick was talking about.
I'm going to do more on what we heard just past hour from Pete Hegseth and the Joint Chiefs Chairman a little later this hour. Thank you both. Nick, I just want to keep you on for the moment because you've been reporting from northern Israel over the last few days. Tell us what you have seen there.
Yeah, in the last hours, Israel has explained a bit more some of its actions and potentially policy for its second major onslaught against Hezbollah in the past 18 months or so. Overnight, we've heard of more targeted raids. That is to suggest that we've gone from 2 specific targets hit since the beginning of this new phase of the conflict to now multiple in southern Lebanon. Airstrikes again targeting certain areas. Look, when you're up there, it is quite relentless. There is clearly not adequate Israeli forces that we could see in place for a major ground invasion, and instead these targeted raids coming into play, but still a noisy and volatile escalating conflict. Here's what we saw.
As the war fast spills over and twists, here Hezbollah rockets meet Israeli air defence. The fight thickening on the northern border Sunday night.
I've been hearing that for about an hour now. Probably airstrikes over there in southern Lebanon.
Blasts through the dark. With daylight, it persisted, joined by Apache attack helicopters throwing defensive flares. As Israel said, it had overnight led its second targeted raid on the Iranian ally here. Small arms fire close by. Israel has demanded much of southern Lebanon empty out, but there were no open signs they were yet here in number enough for a full invasion. Instead, picking off targets. The goal, to disarm Hezbollah forever, not yet in reach, their rockets constant.
Right over our head.
The house where we took cover had 28 alerts last night.
How long is it? It's like about 10 seconds.
No, it's immediate. You need to hear the more that I hear the siren, but it's the moment that you need to be inside shelter.
Don't you get tired of this?
We get tired. We don't have any choice. Yeah. It's our home.
Now, 488 Lebanese have died, been killed in this latest assault. And Israel today reminding those south of the Litani River in southern Lebanon that is an evacuation area. It seems geographically to be the same, that they're just telling people to get out of. And the same in southern Beirut, around the Dahia suburbs, a roughly similar area. You may interpret some of the words that come with a map from the Israel Defense Forces as suggesting it's slightly larger. But Israel clearly debating, it seems, weighing the extent of its ground moves, going with targeted raids so far, but the ferocity of airstrikes are quite extraordinary.
It's good to have you, Nick. Thank you for your reporting. Stephen, always a pleasure. Thank you. Up next, a closer look at how Iranians are faring after a heavy bombardment last night. I want to speak with a leading expert on Iran right after this.
Weekdays on CNN.
Tonight on 360.
The stories that matter.
This whole area is just engulfed in flames.
From a trusted voice.
We witnessed something nobody alive has ever seen before. You've said that AI could wipe out half of all entry-level jobs. How soon might that happen?
A fearless eyewitness.
We've just gotten a red alert to go down to a bomb shelter.
Every night makes sense of the world.
How do you make the case that USAID's previous mission was in the United States' national interest?
Anderson Cooper 360. Weekdays on CNN.
Why, particularly in Gaza, why is leadership failed here?
Selfish, short-term interest.
The allegations, I mean, this is chilling, stomach-churning stuff.
Yes, it is. What happens, Maria Corina Machado, what happens if you're arrested?
Well, we're taking one day at a time. Do you think that Colombia could be at risk here. What would it take, Mr. President, for Serbia to acknowledge Kosovo's independence? And it is here, on these grounds, St. Peter's Square, that his funeral will be held. This is what 18 months of war has done for the children of Gaza. Where do you find empathy with some of these autocrats?
The genocide in Rwanda made you almost quit photography. Tell us about that moment.
How does his story shape all of you who are the future?
It is a busy news day all around the world.
This is One World.
The world's top headlines with some of the world's biggest players.
Stories that captivate from two unique perspectives. Zain Asher and Biana Golodriga use their extensive experience to cover global news with passion and intellect.
Walk us through what specifically Secretary of State Marco Rubio was talking about. What leverage, if any, does Prime Minister Netanyahu have at this point?
One World with Zain Asher and Biana Golodriga. Weekdays on CNN.
Right, as we cover the many layers of the war with Iran, from the battlefield to the global economic fallout, I do want to take a moment to reflect on the toll being taken on Iranians inside the country and across the global diaspora. My next guest, Narges Bagogli, is a writer, scholar and preeminent expert on the IRGC. She recently penned a piece about Iranians both inside and outside the country feeling fractured between difficult mixed emotions. She described it as, quote, anguished double consciousness, people who despise the ruling establishment in Iran, who have lost family members to its prisons, who have spent decades dreaming of its end, but who cannot bring themselves to celebrate the deaths of Iranian children. Narges joins me now. She's the Assistant Professor of Middle East Studies at Johns Hopkins University and the author of many books, including the one on the IRGC, Iran Reframed, Anxieties of Power in the Islamic Republic. Always good to get you on, Narges. Your insight's really important to us. And in your very poignant piece, you talk about your cousin in Tehran, who you are having a hard time reaching, and your close friend who escaped to the countryside. Just first, give us a sense of what you are hearing from inside Iran right now after what our team described as a very heavy night of bombardment. And US Defense Secretary Hegseth now saying the most intense strikes are coming today.
So last night, my family and friends in Tehran got in touch with me and sent me sounds of what they were hearing outside of their windows. It was very heavy bombardment. Today, apparently more is coming, as you said. Iranians are extremely terrified and exhausted of most of this bombardment. Heavy bombardment is happening at night, so they can't really sleep. And it's very heavy bombs. It's shaking structures all around them. And all of this is coming on the heels of that, the bombing of the oil depots across Tehran, which has resulted in the skies of Tehran turning black and acid rain falling. And so it's, a mass sort of poisoning event followed by all of these different kinds of heavy bombardments. So people are quite both exhausted, terrified, but at the same time also increasingly becoming aware that this is a war on Iran and on Iranians. And so it's also driving a lot of anger and a desire to really hold down the defense of the country for many people.
Yeah, and you described this as this sort of anguished double consciousness, which I thought was a really sort of well-penned phrase. I want to unpack the many mixed emotions the Iranian diaspora, of course, is feeling watching this unfold from afar, and you have called that a reckoning that is tearing the community apart and leading people to question their very identity. Can you just explain that for us?
Sure. So this war is coming on the heels of a nationwide uprising that happened in late December and early January. It then, upon those uprisings that were happening, the Mossad Persian language Twitter account asked for people to stay in the streets and keep going, and that agents were on the ground with them. And the Crown Prince of Iran, the former Shah, also set on January 8th and 9th for people to take over city centers. And those were the days that resulted in huge massacres by the state of the protesters that were in the streets. And that left a very large wound for Iranians to have the state turn the guns on them in that fashion. And that also it included a lot of Iranians in diaspora who were quite horrified at what they saw. This also then within the broader context is happening over about a little bit over 8 years of a satellite television station called Iran International, who's beaming into Iran and across the diaspora with a very pro-Pahlavi bent. So the diaspora, which for many, many, many decades was very diverse in how it thought about what it wanted for the future of Iran, has sort of become extremely polarized in the past year and a half to 2 years to being either you're pro-Pahlavi and wanting some kind of intervention in Iran, or you don't like the governing establishment and you don't know what any other options sort of remain for you and those inside of Iran. And so this form of real polarization that is happening in Iranian society, both inside the country and outside of the country, is leading towards a lot of fractured relationships, a lot of division, and real vitriol in the community.
Yeah, and I'm hearing that by just speaking to friends who are Iranian as well, and it's really difficult. I want to get your analysis on Iran's strategic thinking as well, as someone who embedded with the IRGC for your research and writing. I remember talking to you about this when you wrote the book. You argue Iran is not going to surrender, that it is prepared for a war of attrition. Meanwhile, here's some of what we heard from US President Trump recently, and then let's chat about this.
We took a little excursion because we felt we had to do that to get rid of some evil. And I think you'll see it's going to be a short-term excursion. We've already won in many ways, but we haven't won enough.
We're achieving major strides toward completing our military objective. And some people could say they're pretty well complete. We could call it a tremendous success right now as we leave here. I could call it, or we could go further, and we're going to go further.
Well, the new Supreme Leader announced, who certainly seems to suggest consolidates the power of the Revolutionary Guard. Where does this leave us?
So in all of my research in the Revolutionary Guard, I was looking at one of the biggest fractures in that organization was the generational divide. There was the older generation who were, many of them commanders at the time, who had experienced trench warfare in the 1980s, the Iran-Iraq War, and who really did not want to take the country in a position that it would be in continued warfare with the outside world, and sort of had a bit more of a desire to push for different kinds of solutions. Many of those commanders have been assassinated now in these decapacitation strikes that have happened over the past many weeks and months. And so now what I am seeing is that this younger generation of IRGC has now risen into the command structures of the organization, and they have very close ties with this new Supreme Leader, Mojtaba Khamenei. This younger generation of the IRGC has fought on the ground in Iraq and Syria, and has gone in and out of Gaza and Lebanon for many years now. They are the ones who have been sort of in charge of bleeding the Americans dry in Iraq and forcing them to leave. And so we are now dealing with a much harder and more hardened IRGC commander class than we have been in the past. And I think that this is something that has not quite, been understood in Washington, that this is a different generation of the IRGC. They are not deterred by this kind of language from Washington, and they have been fighting American forces in the region for over a decade now in very close combat. And so this is something that we have to really understand. As President Trump is saying those threatening words to Iran, the IRGC is responding today very, very sort of in line in a threatening language of their own very immediately after hearing that. So I think that we are now dealing with a different kind of organization than we were even dealing with 2 months ago.
So with that in mind, let's just get back to some of the sound that we just heard last hour. This is Pete Hegseth. This is a conflict that is not a forever war, he said, nor a quagmire. You've written, quote, the assumption that Iran's population will continue to greet its violent dismemberment with gratitude rather than resistance is the same assumption that has produced every catastrophic miscalculation of the past century. How do you square the US military's thinking with this reality then inside Iran? And I want to get your thoughts on another moment from the Pentagon briefing where Pete Hegseth made some strong religious overtures. Just have a listen to this.
Blessed be the Lord, my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. He is my loving God and my fortress, my stronghold and my deliverer, my shield, in whom I take refuge. May the Lord grant unyielding strength and refuge to our warriors, unbreakable protection to them and our homeland, and total victory over those who seek to harm them. And amen. God bless our troops.
Two things here. The Christian faith becoming an increasing part of the US narrative in this war. Witness what we just heard last hour. And I wonder what you make of that. And to the first point, given what you've said about this new generation of Revolutionary Guardsmen, what do you make of what we've heard as sort of threats on them from this Pentagon briefing today?
So this revolutionary language that's coming from Pete Hegseth, as well as Lindsey Graham, as well as others within this administration and followers of Trump, is slightly reminiscent of what we heard a couple of decades ago in the lead up to the Iraq War, but now it's very much on steroids. And it's being, back then in 2003, we didn't have social media like we do today. So what is coming, this sort of language of a new holy war or 21st century crusade, is being translated almost immediately into Persian and Arabic and pinging around the region. This is also one of the reasons in which Ayatollah Ali Sistani, one of the grand ayatollahs of the Shia world, who resides in Iraq, gave a fatwa 2 days ago to protect Iran. This is turning into an extremely dangerous moment. And for Pete Hegseth and others who say that this is not another forever war, I don't think the Americans want a forever war, but they are now dealing with a country 4 times the size of Iraq, with a population of 90 million that also has very deep ties into many communities, especially Shia communities, but others across the region. The more that this is going to be talked about as a religious war, as a Christian and Judeo-Christian sort of crusade on the Middle East, the more that this is going to inflame what is already a very combustible situation and context across the region.
Narges, getting your analysis so important to us. Thank you so much. If you get a chance to read Narges's book, it's a terrific read. So I'm going to plug it here for you. Couldn't be more important that people are sort of informed, better informed on what is going on as we move through what is, of course, the 11th day of this war. Thank you. Right, I want to get us live to Wall Street. Before I do that, because we're about to hear the bell ring on Wall Street, let's bring up these futures markets. This is what is generally a good indication of how these markets will open. So let's have a look at the US futures market. And they are mixed going into this trading session. And of course, comments by Donald Trump yesterday really providing a sort of, real boost for these markets. And so the session closing on the high yesterday, we're not seeing that sort of behavior again today. A very mixed open, as we see oil prices, which have significantly dropped off from their sort of highs of around about $100 down to the low 80s, just rising a little bit once again. Right, we're going to get the bell for you. The CEO of AT&T ringing the bell to mark the 150th anniversary of the first ever phone call.
Gaza City is just this way, and as you can hear behind me, there's a lot of ongoing fighting between Israeli forces and Hamas militants. This is the way that we go in to what they say is an extensive tunnel system in Bani Suhaila. One Palestinian man was shot in the leg. We saw him being taken out by ambulance. But now we're seeing more and more Israelis coming out to protest against the current government. And that sound you hear behind me are hundreds of Israelis who are welcoming those 4 female Israeli soldiers just freed from Hamas captivity. They were at home that fateful Saturday morning when Hamas terrorists burned their house to the ground.
I feel responsible to tell their story because I believe the world's forgotten.
How much is too much, sir? At what point is it time to end this war?
On Laura Coates Live, we cover it all. From legal battles.
At least one juror has now been excused.
Political showdowns.
How much you think that weighs on the president?
And the conversations in between.
Wayne from Washington. Wayne, what's your question? Will you take this all the way to the Supreme Court?
I'm not refuting a syllable of what you said.
What do you say to people who are looking to find their voice?
All on Laura Coates Live. Tuesday through Saturday on CNN.
When you travel the world, make sure the world travels with you. Check in, log on, and get connected with all of the latest developments at your fingertips. CNN Partner Hotels. Connected to your world.
I'm Ben Wiedemann in Rome, and this is CNN.
This is CNN Breaking News.
And welcome back. I'm Becky Anderson in Abu Dhabi. You're watching Connect the World from our Middle East programming headquarters. These are your headlines this hour. And during a press briefing at the Pentagon a short time ago, US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said that the US will not relent in its war with Iran until, quote, the enemy is totally and decisively defeated. And he added that the ultimate decision to end the war rests with President Donald Trump. Well, the CNN team in Tehran reports heavy aerial bombardment overnight Monday into Tuesday. They tell us the impact of the airstrikes caused the walls of buildings to shake. The strikes seem to target the eastern part of Tehran as well as the area close to Mehrabad, which is an airport which had already been targeted in past days. Well, 2 men are being held without bail after IEDs were tossed near the home of New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani during an anti-Islam protest on Saturday. Court documents show the suspects face several federal charges, including attempts to provide material support to ISIS and using a weapon of mass destruction. Well, a crowded field remains for a special election in Georgia today that is testing the power of President Donald Trump's endorsement. Trump has backed former prosecutor Clay Fuller to replace Marjorie Taylor Greene for the seat. The vote comes as the Republicans have a razor-thin majority in Congress. Let's get back to the region. Oil prices down today after US President Donald Trump suggested the war in Iran could end soon. The global benchmark sitting around $91. There you go, 92 on the barrel right now. Off its highs, of course, of nearly 120 in the Monday session, but still much higher than pre-war levels. Mr. Trump trying to somewhat brush off fears about the impact on prices for the United States.
You have to keep the straits flowing. With all of that, it affects other countries much more than it does the United States. It doesn't really affect us. We have so much oil. We have tremendous oil and gas, much more than we need. We have Venezuela now as our new partner, great partner. We're in a very good position, but very unfair to other parts of the world, like China as an example. I mean, we're doing this for the other parts of the world, including countries like China. They get a lot of their oil through the straits.
Well, the president referring to the Strait of Hormuz, of course, which some 20% of global oil supplies move through, but has effectively come to a standstill to all intents and purposes now. The White House says the U.S. military will begin escorting ships through the waterway if needed, though no detail on that provided by the Joint Chiefs Chairman at the briefing earlier today. Saudi Arabia's Aramco, the world's top oil exporter, is warning of catastrophic consequences, and I quote them there, should disruptions continue. Well, my next guest is Julien Matonnier, who is an energy markets economist for Energy Intelligence. Thank you for joining us. We heard Donald Trump there say that the US won't be impacted that much by the ongoing disruption. Clearly some domestic political messaging there. Gas prices, of course, hitting an 18-month high there today. So I just wonder, in the first instance, before we sort of, take a kind of wider global picture, what is the reality for US consumers at this point?
Well, I think, Becky, since yesterday, we know where the pain point is. I mean, President Trump talked down this market to help relieve the pressure. And if you excuse the little dancing and the kitsch music after Trump's speech, somehow it seems it has worked. But we also know that at more than $100 per barrels, US gasoline at the pump is getting close to $4, perhaps $5 per gallon. And this is a very sensitive issue. This is the pain point, I think, for the US. Hence, Donald Trump's attempt to relieve pressure on this market.
Because Mr. Trump said that the war was close to complete, only to turn around on social media and threaten to hit Iran 20 times harder if it doesn't does anything to stop the flow of oil. If the US and Israel continue to hammer Iran, clearly these supply risks are still present. And I think many of us watching these markets recover, as it were, with the oil price slipping back yesterday on the back of Donald Trump's comments, weren't surprised by the comments, but were somewhat surprised that traders had sort of taken them as given when the sort of fundamentals basically say something completely different. And Aramco is saying something completely different. Should this war not end anytime soon and this oil not get moving, we are looking at a really dismal picture at this point, are we not?
Yes, we are. I mean, the paper market, the derivative market has been prompter to react than the physical market. As you pointed out, last night, the price of Brent oil closed just short of $99 per barrel after straying close to 120. So we know that if the current situation in the Strait of Hormuz last another week, perhaps more, then oil will return to $120 per barrel, perhaps even more. Should the conflict subside, we would see the fair value of oil getting closer to $70 per barrel. But that's the optimistic scenario. I mean, right now you said $90 per barrel. This is where Brent is. That's a lot. But if you care to consider that 20 or 25% of the world's oil and gas supplies is currently stranded in the Gulf, it's still well below the $139 per barrel reached in the spring of 2022 when Russia invaded Ukraine. So, you've got random price duration, but they tell me that this market is still very much driven by headlines, with President Trump very much in the driver's seat. And maybe, we should get back to the fundamentals to see what's happening. Right now, it looks dire, but the physical market is still, it's still got a little bit more time before it gets really bad, I would say, compared with the derivative market, which is reacting, of course, very strongly.
Absolutely, and you're making some really good points. Let's talk about that kind of slightly longer term picture here. Look, I mean, there are so many variables at play. We can't say what's going to happen, in the next 24 hours, let alone in the next sort of, 24 days or months. But we are already seeing countries across Asia starting to ration supplies and announce austerity measures. So I guess the question that you will be asking yourself and clients will be asking you as they look at their portfolios and wonder where these Asian markets go next is how much worse does it get for that region?
You're absolutely correct on that, Becky. I mean, if the conflict lasts more than a month, I think the term global recession will probably be too weak to describe the situation. Perhaps depression will be more appropriate. I mean, US consumers are already stretched. We mentioned US gasoline prices at the pump. Europe is probably where the macro consequences will be the hardest. And you mentioned Asia. Asia is in a very bad spot. A lot of those refined products are going to Asian market. It seems Japan was pressing for the release of strategic petroleum reserves, which tells you that the situation is probably very dire in Japan. South Korea is probably in the same situation. Other Southeast Asian country, like perhaps Thailand, I think Pakistan, Bangladesh. Asia at the moment seems able to absorb the jump in oil prices, thanks to very low starting points, with inflation broadly in control in most of Asia. But Asia is very vulnerable to oil price volatility. So it's going to be a problem, and it relies heavily on imports, like Europe, by the way. The only exception being maybe Australia, Malaysia and Indonesia, because they produce fossil fuel. But all of our economy already run deficits, and they're going to be in trouble if this lasts.
You can get a better Connect the World discussion here as we join the dots around the world on this story. Let me finally just close out by getting your analysis on this G7 announcement that they are ready to release reserves if needed. That, of course, includes a number of European countries. I mean, of course, it would be significant. One estimate putting around 1 billion barrels onto the market. But even the sort of the statement helps to calm things down. You know, we could do this if we want to. But I wonder if they are forced into releasing those reserves. How does that help cap prices? And if so, for how long? I mean, what can countries do to absorb this shock? They are all talking and holding emergency meetings about energy security and supply, energy prices, and the economic picture going forward at this point.
Well, you are perfectly correct, Becky, to say that it's about the announcements. You know, those inventory release, they can be effective in the short term, maybe not so much in the longer term. But I think the real initial value of a release is in the announcement itself, because oil traders react immediately to such market signals, and they can therefore rapidly reprice their assets or barrels accordingly. So in an ideal world, you know, it works like OPEC, it likes the US Fed FOMC announcement. If the signal is read as a credible commitment, then it can be enough to deflate the price. And it's definitely not a structural fix, but it's more likely a psychological band aid, and it can perfectly last long enough if the conflict is short enough or not. If I can just quote a number to finish, the world has approximately 9.61 billion barrels of crude oil and petroleum in storage. So, you know, it's a lot to cover a disruption for several months. I mean, the rest of the story is how those releases will be allocated in proportion to each country, or will the US take bear the brunt of it? It's still being discussed, but it can probably help, at least in the short run.
Fascinating. It's good to have you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. You're watching Connect the World from our Middle East programming headquarters here in Abu Dhabi in the UAE. I'm Becky Anderson. Time here is about 5:45 in the evening. Still to come, more members of the Iranian women's football team are now seeking asylum in Australia. What pushed them to this point? That is just ahead.
In a divided America,
Where do I fit? You tell me, ask your partner.
Abby Phillip brings all sides to the table.
Can you name one thing you do differently? The hypocrisy is so rank, folks at home. Classes in session.
To talk about the issues.
Congresswoman, it is false. The answer is zero.
The policies.
What is the Democratic Party about? Can you answer that question?
And the biggest debates to wrap up your day.
I hear what you're saying Trump believes in, but do you think it's a good idea?
News Night with Abby Phillip, Tuesday through Saturday on CNN.
Every day we take a step back to look at the big picture.
From decisions made in Washington to the ripple effects across Asia, Europe, and beyond. We follow the story as it unfolds and hear every voice to make sure the information is clear, fair, and relevant to you. In a world packed with noise, facts matter. That's what we do here. This is The Brief.
Did the re-election of Donald Trump play any role in your decision to resign? Why do you need to study it? It sounds like you have the facts on your fingertips.
Great question.
You continue to fight for your name to be cleared. Why? Do you have any concerns about Elon Musk?
There really is much more that unites us as Americans than that which divides us.
A moment with huge consequences for the nation and the world.
Watch The Lead, weeknights on CNN.
Caitlin Collins is your DC source, bringing you unprecedented access to the White House.
What would you say to the survivors who feel like they haven't gotten justice?
Capitol Hill.
What does re-examining that look like? Are you saying that that's not going to happen? What exactly are your day-to-day responsibilities?
And beyond.
And good evening from Davos, Switzerland, where President Trump just capped off a whirlwind trip. You were obviously named by President Trump.
For in-depth political coverage and analysis, watch The Source, weekdays on CNN.
Well, the Iranian women's football team appears to be stuck in Australia today. A source tells CNN that no country is willing to facilitate their travel back home. Now, this comes after two more members of the team, a player and a coach, sought asylum there at the end of the Asia Cup tournament. 5 players have already been granted humanitarian visas by the Australian government. Immigration Minister Tony Burke is seen here with those players. Well, all of this after the team stayed silent while their national anthem was played last week, just ahead of the match with South Korea. CNN's Christina McFarlane explains how a single moment turned these athletes into targets of the Iranian regime.
As Israeli and American bombs began falling on Iran, a group of women were thousands of miles away on a soccer pitch in Australia. On March 2nd, just days into the war, the Iranian women's national team had come to the Gold Coast to play in the AFC Women's Asian Cup. But what they did next was an act of sporting bravery that has made them targets at home and icons to millions who oppose the regime watching from abroad. Their tournament had barely begun when the team made a decision to stand in silence as their national anthem played. Back in Tehran, state TV's reaction was swift. This host calling the move a pinnacle of dishonour, saying they were traitors during wartime who must be dealt with more severely. For some of the players, the drama off the pitch became too much to contain.
Obviously, we're all concerned and sad at what's happened to Iran and our families and our loved ones. But I really hope it's very good for our country to have good news ahead. And I hope that my country would be strongly alive.
3 days later, something had changed. Before their second game in Australia, the players sang the anthem and saluted, prompting fears of coercion by travelling Iranian minders.
We have so much concern regarding our families and the people in Iran. Nobody loves war, but here we are coming to play football professionally, and we do our best to concentrate on our football and match ahead.
Eliminated from the tournament with their team bus surrounded by supporters chanting "Save our girls," focus turned to whether any of the players would look to defect. Earlier Monday, the answer came. News that 5 women had fled the team hotel and are now, a source says, seeking asylum under the protection of Australian police. The story has now reached the very top, with US President Donald Trump posting about the players' possible fate, congratulating the Australian Prime Minister for doing a, quote, very good job. Christina McFarlane, CNN, London.
Well, the members from the Iranian women's team who have sought asylum now stand at 7, 6 players and a coach. Well, still on the football pitch, the Iraqi men's national soccer team is only 1 match away from securing a spot in the FIFA World Cup. If they qualify, it'll be the team's first time in the tournament for 4 decades. But the war in Iran might put an end to this dream. The final game should be played by the end of this month in Mexico. Getting a flight, however, is a challenging task for the players, as the airspace, of course, has been closed ever since the Iraq Football Association has been pledging FIFA to delay the playoff game. FIFA is expected to make up its mind by the end of the week. More on that as we get it. Right, still to come. Why President Trump appears to be changing his tune on the investigation into a deadly strike on that Iranian school at the beginning of this war.
It is a busy news day all around the world.
This is One World.
The world's top headlines with some of the world's biggest players.
Stories that captivate from two unique perspectives. Zain Asher and Biana Golodriga use their extensive experience to cover global news with passion and intellect.
Walk us through what specifically Secretary of State Marco Rubio was talking about. What leverage, if any, does Prime Minister Netanyahu have at this point?
One World with Zain Asher and Biana Golodriga. Weekdays on CNN.
Oh, there are big explosions taking place. We need to get our flak jackets on. These troops are Russian airborne forces. Come. You can see Evan Gershkovich is in there. Are you holding up all right? There are so many people who are coming out to pay their last respects to the Russian opposition leader.
We have thousands of people. They need us to help them.
Are you still optimistic?
The best is in front of us.
US President Trump now appears to be softening his stance on blaming Tehran for a strike in a girls' school there in southern Iran. Now, Tehran blames the US, and new video evidence suggests the US was targeting a nearby Revolutionary Guard base with a Tomahawk missile at the time of the impact. That strike happened February the 28th, the first day of this war. At least 168 kids and 14 teachers were killed. We get the latest now from CNN's Isabel Young.
This is the moment a missile slammed into an Iranian base in Minab, a city in southern Iran, just over a week ago. In this freeze frame, you can see it clearly. Weapons experts tell CNN the wings and tail are consistent with a Tomahawk missile. This new video is the clearest evidence yet that suggests it was the United States that struck an elementary school next to that Revolutionary Guards base, killing scores of students. The US has been firing those Tomahawk missiles at Iran from ships and submarines for more than a week now. Israel doesn't use them, experts tell us.
Mr. President, did the United States bomb a girls' elementary school in southern Iran on the first day of the war and kill 170
No, in my opinion, based on what I've seen, that was done by Iran.
Is that true, Mr. Nixon? It was Iran who did that?
We're certainly investigating.
Iran also doesn't use Tomahawk missiles. And using satellite images, it's clear the school was struck nearly simultaneously with strikes on an adjacent Revolutionary Guards base. That suggests precision targeting. CNN geolocated this video. We think this missile struck the military base, not the school. You can see that other buildings in the direction of the school had just been struck when this was filmed. Isabel Young, CNN, London.
Well, historic UNESCO sites in Esfahan were damaged after an Israeli airstrike hit the nearby governor's building. My colleague Leila Garagozlu has more.
Images are emerging of one of Iran's most beautiful cities being struck by U.S. and Israeli bombardment. Now, one of those sites, Chehed Sutun, has been damaged by U.S. and Israeli bombardment just meters away. This video, released by state media, shows windows shattered and latticework broken. Elsewhere in Esfahan, striking images show the Nakhshe Jahan Square with a plume of smoke from an airstrike, highlighting the proximity of this war to Iran's historic and cultural landmarks. And in Tehran, the Golestan Palace, the setting for many coronation ceremonies of Iranian kings, famous for its intricate mirrorwork, now left in ruins, shattered by debris from shockwaves of an airstrike. Images show extensive damage to what UNESCO calls a masterpiece of the Qajar era. The UN's World Heritage Arm has put out a statement expressing concern and a reminder: cultural property is protected under international law.
Layla's content will be available on CNN Digital. I'll post that and the most insightful interviews that I conduct throughout the day on Connect the World's webpage, as well as my social channels. So if you're not watching all of the content across the hours, you can find me at Becky CNN and on Instagram and X. And I also want to point out this piece from my colleagues Phil Mattingly and Zachary Cohen. They explain, quote, the grim choice facing the Trump administration. Bottom line, until the US Navy can guarantee that tankers won't become floating pyres, the global economy remains held hostage by a 21-mile wide strip of water. I'm going to be linking to this kind of strong CNN reporting on those social pages too. And stay with us, because that is the first hour done of Connect the World. We will be back, of course, at the top of this hour in about 4 minutes' time with more for you.
Weekdays on CNN.
Tonight on 360.
The stories that matter.
This whole area is just engulfed in flames.
From a trusted voice.
We witnessed something nobody alive has ever seen before. You said that AI could wipe out half of all entry-level jobs. How soon might that happen?
A fearless eyewitness.
We've just gotten a red alert to go down to a bomb shelter.
Every night makes sense of the world.
How do you make the case that USAID's previous mission was in the United States' national interest?
Anderson Cooper 360. Weekdays on CNN.
Why, particularly in Gaza, why has leadership failed here?
Selfish, short-term interest.
The allegations, I mean, this is chilling, stomach-churning stuff.
Yes, it is. What happens, Maria Corina Machado, what happens if you're arrested?
Well, we're taking one day at a time. Do you think that Colombia could be at risk here? What would it take, Mr. President, for Serbia to acknowledge Kosovo's independence? And it is here, on these grounds, St. Peter's Square, that his funeral will be held. This is what 18 months of war has done for the children of Gaza. Where do you find empathy with some of these autocrats?
The genocide in Rwanda made you almost quit photography. Tell us about that moment.
How does his story shape all of you who are the future?
On Laura Coates Live, we cover it all, from legal battles.
At least one juror has now been excused.
Political showdowns.
How much you think that weighs on the president?
And the conversations in between.
Wayne from Washington. Wayne, what's your question? Will you take this all the way to the Supreme Court?
I'm not refuting a syllable of what you said.
What do you say to people who are looking to find their voice?
All the news, all on Laura Coates Live, Tuesday through Saturday on CNN.
If you can keep your head when markets all around you are losing and you can't see a way through, if you can trust your instincts on when to buy, sell, or wait, and don't be tired by the waiting, if you can trade and not make money your master, meeting triumph and disaster in equal measure, if you can run with the bulls and not be afraid of the bears, treating both impostors the same. For when we come together, we will make sense of it all. And then the business world will be yours and all that is in it. And what is more, my friend, you will be profitable. For you are indeed watching Quest Means Business.
In a divided America,
Where do I fit?
You tell me, ask your party.
Abby Phillip brings all sides to the table.
Can you name one thing you do differently?
The hypocrisy is so rank, folks at home. Classes in session.
To talk about the issues,
Congresswoman, it is false. The answer is zero.
the policies,
What is the Democratic Party about? Can you answer that question?
and the biggest debates to wrap up your day.
I hear what you're saying Trump believes in, but do you think it's a good idea?
News Night with Abby Phillip, Tuesday through Saturday on CNN.
Did the re-election of Donald Trump play any role in your decision to resign? Why do you need to study it? It sounds like you have the facts on your fingertips.
Great question.
You continue to fight for your name to be cleared. Why? Do you have any concerns about Elon Musk?
There really is much more that unites us as Americans than that which divides us.
A moment with huge consequences for the nation and the world.
Watch The Lead, weeknights on CNN.
I'm Dr. Sanjay Gupta in Atlanta. And this
CNN.
This is CNN Breaking News.
And welcome to the second hour of Connect the World from our Middle East programming headquarters. I'm Becky Anderson here in Abu Dhabi. The time is 6 in the evening. It is 10 a.m. in Washington. And in the past hour or so, the US Defense Secretary says that the war with Iran will, quote, end on our timeline. Pete Hegseth laying out what he calls a winning war effort in a Pentagon briefing a little earlier. Have a listen.
We're crushing the enemy in an overwhelming display of technical skill and military force. We will not relent until the enemy is totally and decisively defeated.
Well, the US Joint Chiefs Chairman Dan Kane providing details of just what the US is targeting and hitting.
To date, they've struck more than 5,000 targets. U.S. Strategic Command bombers recently dropped dozens of 2,000-pound GPS-penetrating weapons on deeply buried missile launchers across the southern flank. We also have struck several one-way drone factories to get at the heart of their autonomous capability.
Now, this is coordinated action with Israel, of course, and inside Iran. Israel launching what it says is a broad wave of strikes in Tehran after hitting military infrastructure in other parts of the country. Video from the Iranian Red Crescent shows rescue operations at a heavily damaged building. Iran's UN ambassador says more than 1,300 civilians have been killed in Iran since the war started 11 days ago. In Israel, a second person has died from an Iranian ballistic missile strike. Israel counting 12 deaths in this 11-day war so far. And an alarming warning today from the world's biggest oil exporter, Saudi Aramco, fearing potentially catastrophic consequences for oil markets if the Strait of Hormuz does not reopen for commercial oil shipping. Well, I'm going to start with the CNN team in Tehran reporting heavy aerial bombardment overnight into Tuesday. They tell us that the impacts were more severe than in previous days. I'm going to mention, as we have been doing since CNN has been operating in Iran, that it operates there with the permission of the Iranian government as required under local regulations. We maintain full editorial control over what our teams there report. CNN's Fred Pleitkin is on the ground and describes what he heard and saw.
It was a very kinetic night here in the Iranian capital, Tehran. We ourselves witnessed several waves of what appeared to be very heavy airstrikes. And the building that we're in right now and that we're staying in was shaken on several occasions from the sheer force of the impact. Now, from our vantage point, it appeared as though especially targets in the east of Tehran were being attacked, also possibly around Mehrabad Airport, which is in the west of Tehran. It is actually an area that has been attacked in the past as well. All this as the airstrikes conducted mostly by the U.S. and Israel continue not just here in Tehran, but of course throughout this entire country. Meanwhile, the political standoff also continues as well. President Trump, of course, saying that he vows to keep the Strait of Hormuz open for oil shipments into the world's markets, whereas the Iranians are warning that they are the ones who control the Strait of Hormuz. A source close to the Iranian government telling me that the Iranians are the ones who control the taps of the world's oil supply. They say that Iran is even thinking of imposing duties on ships carrying oil that are affiliated with countries friendly to the United States. At the same time, the Iranians are saying also at this point in time, they see no sense in negotiations with the United States and are preparing for what could be a long war. Fred Pleitkin, CNN, Tehran.
All right, that's the latest reporting from Fred in Tehran. We've got Nick Payton-Walsh back with us this hour from Tel Aviv. Paula Hancock is here in Abu Dhabi. Nick, let me start with you. Another brutal overnight attack on Tehran. We've heard from the US Pentagon, from the Joint Chiefs Chairman, about what the military targets are for the US. Is Israel closer to achieving their war goals? Is it clear at this point?
In Iran, I think it's fair to say the Iranians have set the Israelis have set quite an expansive set of potential political goals. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at one point saying he wanted democracy, and they've clearly had regime change in their sights. And indeed, a reminder that just in the last 48 hours, we've had them reiterating their pledge to kill the successor of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, his son Mujtaba, who has laid extraordinarily low since his appointment to that particular role, perhaps for obvious reasons. But yet the intensity of the strikes persists, certainly. And we got, I think, from speaking the press conference we just had at the Pentagon, a bit more clarity as to the US goals. According to Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, they remain very much what they were when this all began. Destroy the missiles and the bunkers, destroy the Navy, over 50 ships hit, and then also prevent Iran from ever being able to have a nuclear weapon. Well, that was pretty far-fetched, it seemed, prior to this conflict. But Joint Chiefs of Staff Dan Kane, I'm not suggesting a massive policy difference here, but he talked about the third point being more around destroying the military industrial capabilities, the complex Iran has, its ability to make the drones, make the missiles, to essentially mean, as President Trump keeps saying, they don't have to come back and do this all over again 5 or 10 years later. But perhaps General Kane more tethered to the very specific gritty reality of the 5,000 targets that the United States says it's hit so far. And so I think we're seeing clearly a target list that's grown over time. One, I'm sure, given that Hegseth also said today will be the heaviest day of airstrikes against Iran. And last night, residents in Tehran reported being unable to sleep, along with our team there, owing to the extraordinary ferocity of those strikes. I think we're probably going to see at some point that target list, as it expands, begin to shrink off as well. But ultimately, as we keep hearing again and again, the officials around President Trump absolutely clear that they want to give him maximum latitude to decide at any moment that he wants to declare this a victory. And I think at this point we're seeing this remarkable ambivalence between President Trump saying the war is very complete or so close, but also saying it could go on for a long time. But clearly in the gap, he's hoping for some sort of Iranian political concession, perhaps, to enable him to bring this to a close. But I think that's, frankly, a misreading of the regime in Tehran as it still exists.
Yeah, we also heard from Pete Hegseth last hour or so. Paula, let me bring you in on this. That the last 24 hours have seen, he said, Iran fire the lowest number of weapons that they've been able to do. Now, that is very likely the case, and we have to take that as given. Certainly on this Gulf region, where many of those missiles are aimed, we have seen a reduction in incoming strikes. They come, though, and the UAE and both Bahrain have been struck today again, and it is raising the question as to why it is that certainly in the last 24 hours or so, Iran seems to be directing its ire here and at Manama. Is it clear?
Yes, well, we just had one more person killed in Bahrain, Becky, as a residential building was hit. And then yesterday there were some 32 injured when a residential building was hit as well. And here in the UAE, we have had the highest number of missiles and drones fired as far as the publicly available figures go. But we've been asking experts as to why exactly there is this phenomenon when the UAE, which refused to let the US use its bases or its airspace, does appear to be receiving the greatest number of projectiles. And what they have said is that they believe that Iran can tick more than one box when it tries to attack the UAE, saying that it is a global powerhouse, so it affects the global economy. If they target Dubai, for example, the US military security alliance, which is what Tehran cites as a reason that they are attacking these Gulf nations. And then, of course, it is geographically close. It's something like 100 kilometers. It's the most narrow area. Becky?
Paula, good to have you, and Nick, thank you. So we've got you a Tehran dateline. You've been in Tel Aviv with us and here in Abu Dhabi. Saudi Aramco in Saudi Arabia, the world's leading oil exporter, says prolonged disruption to oil flows through that Strait of Hormuz could cause, and I quote here, catastrophic consequences. The US and Iran trading threats about what is this critical waterway, normally used to transport some 20% of global supply. But we've seen energy prices ease off over the last 24 hours, despite the fact that that strait is actually still pretty much unavailable to the some 200 vessels which are parked up on both sides. Brent crude now at around $91.50 on the barrel. This is lower than it was, of course, Monday, but higher than it was following Donald Trump's comments that the war could end soon. I guess my point is we have been seeing some whiplash with these oil prices. CNN business reporter Anna Kubin live in London, and you've been looking at these oil markets very specifically. Just walk us through what we are seeing and what traders are telling you today.
Yes, Becky. Well, we're seeing this whiplash. We saw last night Trump's comments that the war is, in his words, very complete. Of course, there are some mixed messages coming out of the White House. We saw Hegseth talking about how this war will only end, on the US's timeline once the enemy, Iran in this case, has been decisively defeated. And yes, oil prices are still so much higher than they were before this war broke out on February the 28th. But all traders are breathing somewhat of a sigh of relief just from those comments from Trump. But we've seen from CNN's Fred Pleitgen in Tehran last night, heavy aerial bombardments. We are still very much in a war, Becky. That all-important Strait of Hormuz, through which you've got about 20% of the world's supply, is still choked off. Iran is threatening to bomb vessels going through it. The major shipping companies are avoiding it. And the US, is providing some assurances that there'll be some naval escorts at some point, or they will, backstop these ships with insurance. But that really is not going to cut it. And this all-important waterway is still very much blocked off. So no matter the kind of somewhat of the relief that these investors are feeling today, Becky, we are still very much in a conflict.
Good to have you, Anna. And it's one that we're really focusing on. What happens in that very small 21-mile strait has a real impact on the global economy. Thank you. My next guest is Mohammed Ali Shabani, editor of Amouage Media, which is a digital publication focused on Iran, Iraq and the Gulf countries. Mohammed has analysis which, frankly, is second to none. It's the reason that we regularly talk to him, and he joins us now. And thank you. We heard in that Pentagon briefing a short time ago that the US military is looking at options to escort these vessels through the Strait of Hormuz. How risky is that? How do you expect Iranians to react to that? Let's just start small and we'll go wider at this point.
Sure. Thank you, Becky, again for having me on your show. I really appreciate the feedback. I think that Trump so far has kind of crowed about taking down the large surface vessels in Iran's navy. They put down the elimination of Iran's navy as among the key war objectives. But the reality is that Iran relies on its geography and also on unconventional means to control the strait. And what I mean by that is a very wide array of coastal batteries, coastal missiles, marine drones. And we see many examples of them. And these drones can't be detected by radar. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to target them as well because they're so small. Many of them stealth even. So I think that looking at the potential entry of U.S. war vessels to escort ships going through this strait, which is very narrow, as you say, it's going to basically make them targets. It's going to be very quite easy for Iran to hit them. And so far, they haven't done that. And what's remarkable about the current situation in the Strait of Hormuz is that about 20% of the world's seaborne crude passes through it. Iran has not really sunk any vessel there. There's no real warfare going on right now. This is all just based on pure threats and the insurers basically being quite scared about ships passing through it. We don't know how it's going to look if an actual war breaks out there, right? That's a different situation.
Yeah, you make a really, really good point. And I also think it is important to point out that while we do a lot of talk about drones and ballistic missiles, and rightly so, I mean, we are privy to attacks from both of those here in the UAE. What we haven't talked a lot about over the past 11 days or so is the threat from autonomous sea vehicles, and I'm talking about effectively drones in the sea. And should we see a war break out in that Strait of Hormuz, Persian Gulf, that's the sort of asset that we will be talking about long and hard if we get to that. Look, you've got a really interesting assessment of the change in leadership in Iran, which I think our viewers will benefit from. What do you believe the calculus is in Iran with the appointment of this new supreme leader, Khamenei Jr., if you will? What the idea is, what the consideration is internally, and how the US might be working through this appointment and its impact.
So I think if you want to really boil it down to its essence, the appointment of Khamenei's son, which in usual circumstances I think would never happen, because the Iranian state is founded on explicit rejection of hereditary rule, I think it really sends two messages. Number one is continuity. It's about defiance. It's about clearly stating that we're not going to go anywhere and we're here to stay. And you have to deal with us. I think that's number one. It's about defiance and continuing the fight. But I think maybe counterintuitively, it's also providing a potential off-ramp. And what do I mean by that? I think the Iranian leadership understands that it's militarily inferior to the United States. It's not going to have a military victory. So you have to think about how would Iran define victory, right? Because each state needs to have a kind of end game in which they can claim to have been victorious. And I think for Iran, it's about being able to say that we survived. And not only survived, that we remain, so to speak. What I mean by we here is the state. So having not just the Islamic Republic intact, but in fact led by another Ayatollah Khamenei, that provides an off-ramp. So I think they're not there yet. They still feel, I think, in their strategic thinking that obviously this war will have to end at some point. And as I said previously, it's part of a negotiation, essentially. But they don't want a situation where they'll have a repeat of the past, so to speak. They don't want to have a ceasefire and another conflict 6 months on. They want to be able to impose sufficient cost on the kind of aggressor, quote, states to make sure that we're not going to have a repeat of this, right? And also because of this is part of a negotiation. They don't want to go back to the table at a position which is worse for them than what we had in Geneva prior to the outbreak of this conflict, right? So I think essentially, if you look at it from the US perspective, Trump so far explicitly has been saying that he's not very happy about, obviously, this appointment of Khamenei's son, because what he's really done is replace one Khamenei for another. So it doesn't look very good for him. But at the same time, I think if he can announce that, well, my objective was to take out the father, so to speak, and if my objective was to degrade some of the military capabilities, some of the missiles, etc., the major surface vessels of the Iranian Navy, that could open space for something down the line. I think we're not quite there yet. I think Trump's remarks so far hyping kind of this prospect of peace is more about reassuring markets, which I think is his main concern right now.
Yeah, I do think the potential of an off-ramp, as you described here, is a fascinating idea. Your assessment, of course, also highlighting the sort of four-dimensional chess that we know an Iranian regime is wont to play, and one that not just the US but countries around the world should be well aware of. Your outlet reporting on how Iraq finally is emerging as a theatre for war in this conflict. Just get us a sense of what's going on and how likely a regional spillover is there at this point.
So there are several dimensions to what's occurring in Iraq. Number one is that Iran's allies there, the Shia Arabs, have been firing a ton of drones, U.S. sites. I'm talking about U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, U.S. Consulate in Erbil, etc. We also have the dimension where the Trump administration has been considering deploying or working with Iranian Kurdish opposition groups based in northern Iraq to kind of act as a ground force. and a potential invasion. It appears that Turkish pressure has averted that scenario. The third element to look at is that the Iraqi economy is very much reliant on oil export revenue, and the country most affected by this kind of blockage of transit through the Strait of Hormuz is actually Iraq. So many countries, not just Iraq, Kuwait as well, for instance, Qatar as well has announced a kind of force majeure on its gas exports. They're being stuck with a situation now where they have to essentially shut in production at some point soon because they don't have enough storage facilities, right? They have nowhere to put the oil that they're pumping. So even if we have a situation now where they announce a peace deal today, it's going to take weeks just to deal with the backup. And also, in case they do start to shut down production, that's going to take months. So we're talking about a process where the knock-on effects is not just going to end tomorrow if peace is announced tonight, so to speak.
Mohammed Ali Shabani, it's always a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I always enjoy talking to you. I learn a lot. Thank you. We'll still come. The US and Israel went to war with Iran, but Tehran's neighbours paying the price. We're going to dig deeper into the regional impact of this conflict. More on that is after this.
Today we live in an unpredictable environment and news races around the world at breakneck speed. Demi Moore,
Kate Winslet, Chancellor Merkel.
Welcome to the program.
I think that societies that suppress their women are the least successful economically.
My show brings you the latest news and top news makers. Do you feel the Trump administration understand what's at stake?
I'll be honest, we have to work on it.
What do you want people to know about mortality?
And we also dive below the headlines.
These scenes have been the most emotional scenes for Syria.
What do you want the impact of this particular film to be?
It's corny to say, but it's about love. It's the only thing worth dying for, only thing worth living for.
It's crucial we make sense of what's happening and fully understand what's at stake.
Does Europe have enough forces to patrol 1,300 kilometers of a line of contact against Russia?
Amanpour, weekdays on CNN. Every day we take a step back to look at the big picture, from decisions made in Washington to the ripple effects across Asia, Europe, and beyond. We follow the story as it unfolds and hear every voice to make sure the information is clear, fair, and relevant to you. In a world packed with noise, facts matter. That's what we do here. This is The Brief.
The stories here are many, but there is only one goal.
It's organised, isn't it? But this is probably where a lot of that stops as we start heading into Panama. There's kind of intense violence when they talk about a potential spiral towards collapse.
In Afghanistan, the survivors of the blast and its aftermath dispute the American narrative.
It's most certainly a small device. Moment of joy. Kind of thing that really all of Turkey is desperately hoping for.
All right, I'm Becky Anderson from our Middle East programming headquarters here in Abu Dhabi. It's been 11 days since the first US and Israeli strikes on Iran. The conflict, of course, is spreading, with neighbouring countries reporting fresh attacks. Eyewitness footage shows a fire burning near the UAE consulate in northern Iraq. Counter-terrorism authorities say 3 explosive-laden drones were shot down over Erbil on Monday, with some debris landing near the consulate building. No casualties reported there. Pro-Iranian militia in Iraq have claimed responsibility. Meantime, in the Gulf, Bahrain's Ministry of Interior says 1 person killed and 8 others wounded Monday after an Iranian strike on a residential building. And the UK's Ministry of Defence says British jets intercepted drones in defence of Jordan and Bahrain. And I could go on. Let's discuss all of this with Firas Maqsad. He's Managing Director for the Middle East and North Africa at the Eurasia Group. Always good to have you on, and thanks for joining us again, Firas. This region that I am in, frankly, sitting on the edge, or on edge at this point, caught between the unpredictability of this Iranian regime and indeed the Trump administration at this point, and sort of trying to get on with things, because daily life, of course, does carry on, aside from the points at which we have to seek shelter. We heard from Pete Hegseth earlier on today. He said that Trump gets to control the throttle of this war. That won't exactly be reassuring to Gulf leaders, considering Trump's mission and message does keep changing. And he has said himself that he has been very surprised by the Iranian assault on its Gulf neighbors. Your thoughts?
Becky, Trump's message is inconsistent and keeps changing. He keeps changing the signpost here. What is the objective? Is it regime change, as he alluded to, called on the Iranian people to rise up, seize the opportunity, but didn't commit the U.S. to it? Is it degrading the nuclear program further, which he had claimed to have obliterated? Is it degrading and doing away with Iran's ballistic missile capabilities and drone program? The reality is that the message from the White House has been inconsistent. Now, we can talk about why that's the case, if that's part of the strategy, if Trump is allowing himself some wiggle room to call it a mission accomplished and take the exit ramp at some point, but it's clearly inconsistent. That stands in stark opposition to what the message has been from the GCC, from these Gulf Arab states, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, and Oman. The message all along has been, don't do this. There's a strong and has been a strong preference for a diplomatic outcome to this conflict rather than the war that we're currently in. But equally consistent across the board from these countries to Donald Trump, if you were going to go ahead and do this, do it right, finish the job, don't cut loose halfway and leave us hanging. That continues to be today.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because he is doing it now, of course. They have been dragged in, and I wonder what Gulf leaders, do you believe, are thinking now and going forward. And like you say, not finishing the job at this point is going to leave this thing pretty much undone, and will make things even more difficult going forward. And look, let's be quite clear. There is no love lost between these Gulf nations and Iran. And for those who had a relationship, it seems to be over. There is no goodwill, it seems, left amongst Gulf nations. Neither is there much goodwill around sort of the Arab and Islamic world at this point. So what do you believe happens next?
Yeah, a lot depends on how Trump and Pete Hegseth, as he put it, being in charge of, being at the wheel and in charge of the throttle, depends on where they decide to go next. If Trump calls a decisive victory this week and essentially does not continue to degrade Iran's ballistic and drone programs, then I think a lot of these Gulf states are going to find themselves in a very difficult position. Iran is going to declare victory, even if they're able to continue to send one drone the day after Trump declares victory. They're going to be standing 10 feet tall, claiming to the world that they took on the United States, took on Israel, and kept firing. And so there has to be a diplomatic off-ramp at some point once Iran has been weakened enough. The Russians are making noises, certainly the Kremlin, on the phone with Donald Trump yesterday, offering that off-ramp. The Omanis can potentially step in again. It has to be an organized end to this war rather than a unilateral one where Iran continues to stand tall and fire.
I am also really keen to get your analysis today on the ongoing fighting in Lebanon, or the ongoing Israeli attacks on Lebanon. You've been discussing a diplomatic initiative by the Lebanese state to negotiate with Israel to build a post-war order without the Iran-backed Hezbollah dominating the country. Just talk to us about that and how it fits into the reality on the ground as, of course, this humanitarian crisis grows with, once again, hundreds of thousands of Lebanese people on the move and displaced at this point.
That's right, Becky. Some 500,000 Lebanese internally displaced at this point. Bombing continuing to rock the southern suburbs of Beirut, and certainly much of South Lebanon is evacuated with the anticipation of a possible Israeli ground campaign in southern Lebanon. Listen, the Lebanese state, the Lebanese government is messaging very clearly that it is interested in holding direct, high-level possibly ministerial level negotiations with Israel. Now, mind you, that doesn't mean that the Lebanese government, the Lebanese army in particular, is ready to do the heavy lifting. I continue to be very skeptical about the willingness, perhaps the ability of the Lebanese army to confront Hezbollah, which has been labeled as an outlaw organization by the Lebanese government, calling for both its military and security apparatus to be dismantled. I think the reality of things is that the Lebanese would rather see Israel do the tough job of taking on Hezbollah. The Americans take on the tough job of cutting Iran down to size. But what they're really signaling through this initiative to Israel is that once that is accomplished, they will possibly find a partner in Lebanon in trying to create a new order in which the Lebanese state gets to call the shots, not Iran and not its proxies in Lebanon, i.e. Hezbollah, which decided to open fire and drag Lebanon into a war in defense of Iran and its supreme leader.
You and I have talked about navigating a new Middle East many times, and as we, see the challenges around the region, so we must also try and look beyond those challenges at where this region may be headed going forward, and your insight and analysis on what is going on there in Lebanon and the relations between that and Israel, hugely important as we do that. Firas, thank you. Firas Maqsad in the house for you. Right, I'm Becky Anderson here in Abu Dhabi. Still to come, President Trump sending mixed signals on when the US and Israel's war with Iran might end. We are following reaction up next.
On Laura Coates Live, we cover it all. From legal battles.
At least one juror has now been excused.
Political showdowns.
How much you think that weighs on the president?
And the conversations in between.
Wayne from Washington. Wayne, what's your question? Will you take this all the way to the Supreme Court?
I'm not refuting a syllable of what you said.
What do you say to people who are looking to find their voice?
All the news, all on Laura Coates Live, Tuesday through Saturday on CNN.
Caitlin Collins is your DC source, bringing you unprecedented access to the White House.
What would you say to the survivors who feel like they haven't gotten justice?
Capitol Hill.
What does re-examining that look like? Are you saying that that's not going to happen? What exactly are your day-to-day responsibilities?
And beyond.
And good evening from Davos, Switzerland, where President Trump just capped off a whirlwind trip. You were obviously named by President Trump.
For in-depth political coverage and analysis, watch The Source, weekdays on CNN.
Why, particularly in Gaza, why has leadership failed here? The allegations, I mean, this is chilling, stomach-churning stuff.
Yes, it is. What happens, Maria Corina Machado, what happens if you're arrested?
Do you think that Colombia could be at risk here? Where do you find empathy with some of these autocrats?
How does this story shape all of you who are the future? It is a busy news day all around the world.
This is One World.
The world's top headlines with some of the world's biggest players.
Stories that captivate from two unique perspectives. Zain Asher and Biana Golodriga use their extensive experience to cover global news with passion and intellect.
Walk us through what specifically Secretary of State Marco Rubio was talking about. What leverage, if any, does Prime Minister Netanyahu have at this point?
One World with Zain Asher and Biana Golodriga. Weekdays on CNN.
I'm Valeria Leon in Mexico City, and this is CNN.
This is CNN Breaking News.
And welcome back. You're watching Connect the World with me, Becky Anderson. These are your headlines this hour. And during a press briefing at the Pentagon earlier today, US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said the US will not relent in its war with Iran until, quote, the enemy is totally and decisively defeated. And he added that the ultimate decision to end the war rests with President Donald Trump. The CNN team in Tehran reports very heavy aerial bombardment overnight Monday into Tuesday. They tell us the impact of the airstrikes caused the walls of the buildings to shake. The strikes seem to target the eastern part of Tehran as well as the area close to Mehrabad Airport, which had already been targeted in past days. Well, two more members of the Iranian women's football team, a player and a coach, are now reportedly seeking asylum in Australia as the rest of the squad leaves Australia for Iran. 5 players were granted humanitarian visas earlier by the Australian government. It comes after players stayed silent while their national anthem was played last week against South Korea. As the US-Israeli war with Iran stretches into a second week, President Donald Trump is giving somewhat conflicting answers on how much longer it will last. Monday, he said the war could end soon, or it could go further. Take a listen.
We will not relent until the enemy is totally and decisively defeated. We've already won in many ways, but we haven't won enough.
We've struck over 5,000 targets to date, some of them very major targets. And we've left some of the most important targets for later. We could call it a tremendous success right now as we leave here. I could call it, or we could go further, and we're going to go further.
Well, CNN's Kevin Leptak joining us from Washington. We've just learned that the White House press secretary will brief the press in a couple of hours. What can we expect to hear next from the administration?
I don't think that we're going to hear much clarity about what the president actually thinks the timeline is here. Certainly, Karoline Leavitt is going to come out and I think try and explain a little bit further of what the objectives are, and certainly try and proclaim a degree of victory in accomplishing some of the military objectives. But there's no sense, I think, from people in the administration, at least this morning, that they are anywhere near being able to explain what the actual end game in this conflict is. And, you know, as the president kind of goes back and forth about whether this war could extend for days or weeks, or whether he thinks that the conflict may be ending soon, you know, it does seem as if he's doing some sort of deliberate ambiguity about how much longer he's here. I think recognizing that there are some serious political pitfalls that he has in front of him. And it is true that inside the White House, that there are many, many advisors who are now wondering whether the president needs to be clear about where this is all heading. You know, the president certainly, when it comes to gas prices, is facing some backlash, including from Republicans who recognize that this could potentially be catastrophic for them in an election year that has already been focused on affordability, cost of living issues, that kind of thing. I think part of the reason the president hasn't been able to lay out a consistent endgame is that his objectives, even to him, are somewhat unclear. You know, whether it's just about taking out Iran's missile and nuclear programs, or whether this is about some sort of grander regime change, the president has never really been clear about what exactly he's trying to accomplish. And I think even behind the scenes, it's not necessarily clear to him as he's talking to his advisors where this is all headed. So when we hear Karoline Leavitt today, certainly she'll be asked about all of this, but I'm not sure I would expect any clearer answers from her today.
Yeah, 2 p.m. as I understand it, that briefing is scheduled. Kevin, thank you. Kevin Leptak for you from the White House. French President Emmanuel Macron visited troops aboard the aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle off the coast of Crete on Monday. That is after his decision to deploy about a dozen naval vessels to the Middle East region.
To tell the French people that France, at this time of great turmoil in the region, is operating calmly and methodically in the service of protecting its citizens, in partnership with its allies, and in a strictly defensive manner, and in the service of freedom of movement to ultimately defend our own interests, our citizens, our security, and access to the resources we need, as well as for the global economy, and to live up to our responsibilities, meaning to stand alongside our partners and those with whom we have defense agreements, nothing more.
Well, that comes after the UK says British RAF jets successfully intercepted drones in defence of Jordan and Bahrain. I have to say the French in the skies here over the UAE with their Rafale jets providing what is this multi-layered air defence here in the UAE. Meantime, G7 finance ministers addressing the potential release of strategic oil reserves to counter surging oil prices, but they say, quote, "We are not there yet." Let's bring in CNN producer Sebastian Schuckler in Berlin. Seb, what are the other European leaders saying about what is currently going on in Iran and around the region where I am?
Yeah, Becky, good afternoon. Well, we saw President Macron there on the flagship of the French Navy, the Charles de Gaulle, making a very clear statement that his idea is that these naval vessels are there to be able to protect European assets and European member states. It's very clear that the Europeans are looking in any way possible not to be dragged into this conflict more than is absolutely necessary. They are within their right, of course, to defend their military assets in the region. We've seen, as you mentioned, that British airbase that was attacked in Cyprus. And there are many European soldiers also based around the region more generally. But what I think we're hearing a little bit more from now, concerningly, particularly here in Germany, we heard from the German Chancellor, is a little bit more about what exactly the end game here is for the United States and for Israel, and that the Europeans seem a little confused as to what that is. Take a listen to what the German Chancellor said just a few minutes ago.
The United States and Israel have been waging war against Iran for over a week. We share many of these goals, but with each day of the war, more questions arise. We are particularly concerned that there is apparently no common plan for how to bring this war to a swift and convincing conclusion. Meanwhile, we are witnessing a dangerous escalation. Iran is indiscriminately attacking countries in the region, including close partners and allies of ours. We condemn this in the strongest possible terms.
So we hear there the German Chancellor saying that he's not clear exactly what the situation is or that the means to the end game is. And he also said that last week in the minutes after he met with President Trump in the White House. So that doesn't appear to have evolved in any way. And Becky, you had mentioned earlier what Secretary Pete Hegseth had said earlier today, that the United States will not relent until there is complete victory or defeat of Iran. It doesn't seem clear at the moment what exactly the White House's stated aims are, and that the Germans and the Europeans are still now starting to scratch their head as exactly what this will mean for European allies and when it will come to an end. Because obviously with this there are economic consequences that all European leaders are passing on to members of the public, which is that, you know, the cost of a price of a barrel of oil, as long as that stays high, it gets passed on to consumers. They feel it at the petrol pump and they feel it in their house bills as well. So the Europeans are looking mainly for this to be defensive, but they're also looking for it to come to a swift end and, frankly, for there just to be a clear plan. Becky.
Yeah. I'm hearing the same thing here from Europeans who are very much showing willing in support and solidarity for these Gulf nations. There have been these, you know, incredibly important trade ties built up over years and years, and these Gulf nations sort of leaning into those, both defence deals and others, leaning into these European partners and saying, look, you know, we need your help at this point, and we are seeing that support forthcoming, which has been terrific. Certainly as a resident here, we very much appreciate what these European allies are doing for these Gulf partners. So, Sebastian, it's good to see you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Sebastian Schukla in the house for you. Coming up, then Donald Trump weighing in on Iran's new supreme leader, what the president's comments could mean for the war. More after this.
Weekdays on CNN.
Tonight on 360.
The stories that matter.
This whole area is just engulfed in flames.
From a trusted voice.
We witnessed something nobody alive has ever seen before. You said that AI could wipe out half of all entry-level jobs. How soon might that happen?
A fearless eyewitness.
We just got a red alert to go down to a bomb shelter.
Every night makes sense of the world.
How do you make the case that USAID's previous mission was in the United States' national interest?
Anderson Cooper 360. Weekdays on CNN.
In a divided America,
Where do I fit? You tell me, ask your partner.
Abby Phillip brings all sides to the table.
Can you name one thing you'd do different? The hypocrisy is so rank, folks at home. Classes in session.
To talk about the issues.
Congresswoman, it is false. The answer is zero.
The policies.
What is the Democratic Party about? Can you answer that question?
And the biggest debates to wrap up your day.
I hear what you're saying Trump believes in, but do you think it's a good idea?
News Night with Abby Phillip, Tuesday through Saturday on CNN.
Did the re-election of Donald Trump play any role in your decision to resign? Why do you need to study it? It sounds like you have the facts on your fingertips.
Great question.
You continue to fight for your name to be cleared. Why? Do you have any concerns about Elon Musk?
There really is much more that unites us as Americans than that which divides us.
A moment with huge consequences for the nation and the world.
Watch The Lead, weeknights on CNN.
This missile struck right here. I have seen one war, and here we go again, says this woman. Mr. President, how do you assess the meaning of as long as it takes? Afghan women are afraid that this is the beginning of your efforts to erase them. We're here at the ICC. You are applying for arrest warrants for top military and political leadership. You said recently, we have to find a way to live together.
US President Donald Trump says he doesn't believe Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, can live in peace. Speaking to Fox News, Trump criticized Tehran's choice to succeed the late Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, saying that he expects more of the same hardline policies. Here's what we need to know about Mojtaba. He's 56 years old. He has strong links to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. He was known to have influence behind the scenes of Iran's system. Abbas Milani is director of Iranian studies at Stanford University, and he said future generations will write that Ali Khamenei, with 37 years of destructive and bloody domination, ran Iran's ship aground, and the result of his incompetence and dogmatic thinking was a devastating war. And at the height of this war, and despite the complete failure of all of his plans, the Assembly of Experts appointed his son and the hidden sidekick of his lame duck regime as his successor at the behest of the Revolutionary Guard. Abbas joining us now live from Stanford, California. And just explain what you mean here. You're effectively suggesting that, you know, the instructions left by the former Ali Khamenei, killed, of course, in the first day of this war, were not to choose his son as heir apparent or to choose his son as a leader. He was not, as far as you are suggesting, the Ayatollah's heir apparent. Explain.
Well, first of all, that is an AI translation of the tweet that I did. I originally wrote the tweet in Farsi, but what I meant is this. We don't know clearly what Khamenei's desires were. Some of his allies have said he was definitely against it. My sense is that he wasn't definitely against it. But the force that made this choice was neither the 86 people who convened ostensibly to give him the vote. There are some rumors, some serious stories about him getting only 59 votes out of 86 votes. So it was in no sense won by majority, by consensus, and under some duress, the duress of the IRGC. So this is the IRGC selection. And in my sense, in my view, it is a very wrong-headed choice.
Certainly not the choice that Donald Trump says he would have made. He has called this choice unacceptable. So how do you assess the way that the US go about dealing with this new leadership?
Again, it's difficult to guess, but from everything that the president said yesterday, what the war minister said, they're keen on pressuring the regime. What is not clear to me is what the Iranian response is. What is their strategy? Their strategy seems to be from day one, I think, that they were defeated militarily, and the only way for them to survive is to make the cost of the war so high that the international community, the Persian Gulf states, and the public opinion, the U.S. will pressure the president and Israel to cease the war.
The Iranian high-level official, Ali Larijani, responding just today, and I just want to get your thoughts on this, responding to a recent comment of Donald Trump. Iranian people do not fear your hollow threats, he said. For those greater than you have failed to erase it, it being Iran. So beware lest you be the ones to vanish. Thoughts?
You know, Mr. Larijani and the entire regime, I think, have an Orwellian view of the world. They think they won the 12-day war. That is their official narrative, that the West, the United States, and Israel begged them to cease the virtual destruction of Israel. So what they say and what the reality is, I think, are two different things. They think they can survive this by a combination of attacking these states that were not part of the conflict, and by bluffing. Instead of realism, it says this war is killing innocent Iranians, it is helping the destruction of the infrastructure, and you need to find a way to stop this. But their goal is not to save Iran. Their goal is to save the regime.
Abbas, it's always good to have you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Abbas Milani. And that's just one of the conversations that we've had with experts on this region today and across the myriad of days in the multiple hours of CNN's live coverage. The most insightful interviews that I conduct throughout the day we post on CNN's Connect the World's webpage as well as my social channels. If you miss any of the content that me and my team are producing from CNN's Middle East programming headquarters, you can find it online, whether it's on Connect the World's landing page or my socials. You can find me at BeckyCNN and on Instagram and on X. Right, you're watching Connect the World. There is a lot more ahead. Stay with us.
Today we live in an unpredictable environment and news races around the world at breakneck speed. Demi Moore, Kate Winslet, Chancellor Merkel, welcome to the program.
I think that societies that suppress their women are the least successful economically.
My show brings you the latest news and top news makers. Do you feel the Trump administration understand what's at stake?
I'll be honest, we have to work on it.
What do you want people to know about mortality?
And we also dive below the headlines.
These scenes have been the most emotional scenes for Syria.
What do you want the impact of this particular film to be?
It's corny to say, but it's about love. It's the only thing worth dying for, only thing worth living for.
It's crucial we make sense of what's happening and fully understand what's at stake.
Does Europe have enough forces to patrol 1,300 kilometers of a line of contact against Russia?
Amanpour, weekdays on CNN.
Every day we take a step back to look at the big picture, from decisions made in Washington to the ripple effects across Asia, Europe, and beyond. We follow the story as it unfolds and hear every voice to make sure the information is clear, fair, and relevant to you. In a world packed with noise, facts matter. That's what we do here. This is The Brief.
The Iranian women's football team is leaving Australia without 7 members of the squad today. Sources tell CNN 2 more women, a player and a coach, sought asylum there at the end of the Asian. After 5 players were granted humanitarian visas earlier by the government, the immigration minister seen here with those 5 players. All of this happening after the team stayed silent while their national anthem was played last week before a match against South Korea. CNN's Christina McFarlane with this report.
As Israeli and American bombs began falling on Iran, a group of women were thousands of miles away on a soccer pitch in Australia. On March 2nd, just days into the war, the Iranian women's national team had come to the Gold Coast to play in the AFC Women's Asian Cup. But what they did next was an act of sporting bravery that has made them targets at home and icons to millions who oppose the regime watching from abroad. Their tournament had barely begun when the team made a decision to stand in silence as their national anthem played. Back in Tehran, state TV's reaction was swift. This host calling the move a pinnacle of dishonour, saying they were traitors during wartime who must be dealt with more severely. For some of the players, the drama off the pitch became too much to contain.
Obviously, we're all concerned and sad at what's happened to Iran and our families and our loved ones. But I really hope it's very good for our country to have good news ahead. And I hope that my country would be strongly alive.
3 days later, something had changed. Before their second game in Australia, the players sang the anthem and saluted, prompting fears of coercion by travelling alien-mindeds.
We have so much concern regarding our families and the people in Iran. Nobody loves war, but here we are coming to play football professionally, and we do our best to concentrate on our football and match ahead.
Eliminated from the tournament with their team bus surrounded by supporters chanting "Save our girls," focus turned to whether any of the players would look to defect. Earlier Monday, the answer came. News that 5 women had fled the team hotel and are now, a source says, seeking asylum under the protection of Australian police. The story has now reached the very top, with US President Donald Trump posting about the players' possible fate, congratulating the Australian Prime Minister for doing a, quote, very good job. Christina McFarlane, CNN, London.
Right. That is it for Connect the World. Day 11 of this US-Israeli-Iran war. The fallout, of course, ongoing, and we will do more in the hours to come here on CNN. White House briefing to remind you at 2 p.m. local Washington time. One World with my colleagues up next.
"50 years of us, with the sun, celebrations, the joy and diversity of our people. The Angolan spirit is resilient, beautiful, strong. With our eyes wide open, we push forward, ready to welcome the world in and embrace the next 50 years.
Good morning. Today's weather will be sunny with a high of 31 degrees.
Alexa, music please.
Playing workout music.
Striving for mastery? You need speed, precision, and clarity of purpose. They all add up. Talent is not enough. You've got to prove that you're able to take advantage of unlimited opportunities when they come. And to do that, you need plenty of data. Scratch that. You need unlimited data. And there's no better provider of unlimited data
Access granted
than your all-powerful Glow router.
Whether home or office, enjoy unlimited data on a Glow router. Dial *312#.
You know, I've got unlimited eyes.
Glow Unlimited.
I'm still watching.
Why, particularly in Gaza, why has leadership failed here? The allegations, I mean, this is chilling, stomach-churning stuff.
Yes, it is.
What happens, Maria Corina Machado, what happens if you're arrested? Do you think that Colombia could be at risk here? Where do you find empathy with some of these autocrats? How does this story shape all of you who are the future?